Hey, everybody, and welcome back to X's for Podcast. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction. And yes, I do the fingers whether or not there's a camera. I am joined again by an amazing array of talent. Everybody introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Rod. You can find me at Rod, on Instagram and Twitter.
I'm Nathan. You can find me online at Dazzler AOA at Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Blake. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at BTMorgan85.
I'm Tori. You can find me at Tori_Sheehan on Twitter and maybe on at SMTori on Instagram, but I'm intensely private, so you probably won't get me there.
You can tell which one of me and Tori is looking for followers because she's like, my name is, what's my name? And I'm like, here's how you spell mine, NicoAction. So
I'm in the middle of trying to make them match, and it's not working out.
It's why I went Nico Action. I really wanted Nico, Nico. I just wanted my name, but that's too short some places and taken everywhere else.
Yeah.
I did a couple drunk YouTube videos about comic books a couple times, just as a joke, and I would always forget my Twitter handle. I'd be like, and I'm on. Oh shit, what was it? And
I'm on X.
I've done that before, and mine's never changed.
Yep.
I like that Rod's has changed, and so there's times I've
so many times.
Do I want to take the current one and bleep it over the old one?
I sometimes miss Rod Bunny Slay. Hawksrod was a moment that will not go back to, but I went back to a Buffy reference, which is Rod, the, because Rod Bunny Slay is a Buffy reference, and then Rod, the is a Buffy reference because it's a Buffy, Slayer, or Buffy, Slayer, the, and then so Rod, the.
Yeah,
nice.
We all have our reasons we are who we are, and I feel like that's a weak transition, but I'm going to take it. And today, we're going to talk about one of the stories that made me who I am. Inside of my handy-dandy Salem Center Xavier bag is, of course, the story that we're here to discuss today. And that's, once again, we're discussing this very shiny edition of God Loves, Man Kills. Now, in 1982, Marvel released the second mutant-centered Marvel graphic novel. This one, volume number 5, would feature the X-Men as opposed to their young protégés, the New Mutants. Marvel graphic novel number 5, God Loves, Man Kills, saw a re-release in 2020 in a 2-issue format. Now, in the first part of this video, we've already covered the extended edition part 1, which runs roughly a little less than the first half of the book. We've discussed some of the origins and some of the more complicated things about this story, but I would love to get your guys' reactions halfway through this book. I out of nowhere, kind of harangued 3 of you into this. Nathan sits there and is like, okay, Nico, please calm down. Which X-Men story do you want to cover next? Please calm down. And I'm like, all of them. And I get my mind set on one and we do it. And so I'm like, Tori, Rod, I think Nathan hit up Rod and I was like, Blake, okay, we're all going to read this. We're all going to do this. Okay. That's what we're going to be doing. And for me, this is top 5 X-Men stories of all time. How do you guys feel halfway through this narrative that was always originally meant to be read in one sitting? It was one book, and there was 4 months between editions of the new one. How do you guys feel halfway through?
I think it hurts the book.
Yeah, it does.
This is a book that definitely needs to be read all the way through. There needs to be no breaks.
Yeah.
To fully internalize it and enjoy it for what it is, because it is a really good but also rough definition of what the X-Men are and what they continue to be or try to be, but breaking it up it loses its magic that way.
I agree.
I definitely agree, and we're going to talk about how specifically breaking it up where it breaks it up I think kills one of the most powerful scenes so bad. But Blake, Nathan, Tori, I wanted you guys on this. I wanted Rod on this. I wanted us all to come together and talk about it. I had not read the extended edition, so I kind of didn't know how it would change the story. How do you guys feel about this story in 2 parts?
For me, I think it takes away from the idea of the whole, and it makes it so that I look at it and I go, actually, you weren't doing the plot specifics for a 60-ish page book. You were just squishing all your issues together and pulling out the random cliffhanger that you would normally pull at the end of each one. And this makes it obvious that it is that, to me.
I think one of the cool things about this book is the parallels that happen. Thinking about like the original version. Sorry, when you when you start with the kids.
The original Virgin?
The original.
That's a long time ago.
Bring it, y'all.
Is it?
We're going back. I'm going to take you guys on a journey. All right, we're going to go way back. No.
History of the Marvel Universe with Blake Wade.
I mean, this first page it is close to that. So,
but the chasing the kids, and then looking at like when Kitty is being chased through the streets and escapes, and then gets kidnapped again. You know, and then the parallels of. We move from this Magneto torture scene right into an even worse torture scene. So that page turn and that imagery of the cross and the crucifix, that's huge, man. That's I was like, whoa, because I read the original graphic novel first and then the 2 extended issues to see like what was added and how it was different. But that page turn was really intense, very, very powerful, very scary even. And I don't know if it would hit that hard, and that's how you're going to start off this other book like 4 months later. Like you're emotionally sort of ready for it when you read this as a graphic novel, because it's pulling you so many different ways and you expect it. But then you take a 4-month breather and you're like, you spend $5 on this comic or 4 or whatever it was, you go home and you get out your Mountain Dew and you take a nice crisp sip and you set it down, and then you're like, here we go. Oh, Xavier's being crucified.
Yeah.
Like, I don't smoke, but I need a cigarette in a minute. I don't know what to do here.
Yeah, that's my takeaway too.
Open a nice ice cold Fresca, and I just bathed in the crucifixion.
That's my takeaway too. Just like it's great when you're leading up to it, but just to open your second issue on that is like, oh my God, what is this? But yeah.
And that actually brings me to my first point. Now, Blake, you hit a point that I hadn't even considered. By having the Xavier torture on the heels of the Magneto torture, it even juxtaposes the fact that we're like, man, the X-Men are torturing. Bad news bears over here. But oh my God, they're not even torturing half as bad as they're being tortured at the same time. Moving this apart, I mean, my whole first question was, does this sequence work better for you guys mid-story or at the beginning of the story, you know, opening the second issue? And I think we can all agree this is a better mid-story moment. And it leads me to probably my emotional moment of the issue. Kitty's escape is so overwrought, that sort of 5-6 page experience Kitty goes through as she attempts to survive the trunk from hell. I'm so glad she got out of the world's dumbest trunk. But once she escapes, the key element that transforms this story on every level is Kitty refuses to abandon the police officer. Now, I recognize that 2020 is a very different world than 1982, not for a number of people, but optically speaking. And you know, I'll be honest, I'm a probable ACAB kind of person. I'm like, it's probable, right? And so I don't know that it's necessarily about human life, the sanctity thereof. But in a modern day, where as a gay man, I have been the victim of gay slurs from police officers. I've, you know, literally had police officers call me a faggot, like to my face, like literally. So that in mind, a lot of my family are in the either the armed services or the police, and it's what it is, right? I don't know that I could look away from somebody needing help like that, even if they are a police officer. Now, what Kitty Pryde has been through is more than my brain can even wrap itself around. I would be sitting on the floor rocking back and forth, chewing on a rock by this point if I were Kitty. And she's still motherfucking trucking. And that's, you know, really the key element here. The sanctity of human life is the #1 highest thing for the X-Men. Human life, mutant life, alien life, it doesn't matter. This is the focal point of this story. How does this play out for you guys as the second scene or as the 10th scene, whichever one you see it as? How does this play out for you? Does this drive home the heart of the X-Men, or is this Kitty Pryde just kind of taking the show again?
That's what she always does, though.
She does that a lot.
Kitty Pryde show, but I really think it really speaks to, if not the character of the X-Men, the character of Kitty, and like everything that she's been taught from Xavier's dream, and that she's so innocent that maybe she hasn't had a chance to see as much of the bad side of humanity, and she still, when she is confronted with it, she still does what she thinks the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say I have two parts. First part, since this was made in the 80s, with her protecting the police officer, like all the people, but more specifically the police officer because he was shot, is to show that, you know, even the youngest X-Men is a good, you know, even the youngest mutant in the group of, you know, assault team X-Men, whatever, is a good person. They're heroes, you know, they want to help no matter who they are, and they want to help, you know, the true human heroes, which police officers, firefighters, all that stuff. But if this was a new written issue that was made in like 2020 or 2021, like today, I would say this was more maybe propaganda, because you're defending a police officer and all that, and you're like, oh, Kitty loves police officers, she's defending, even though it's just defending a person because they're hurt. I feel like in the context of today, if it was made today instead of just a throwback, it would be more propaganda. But because it was made in the 80s and they were just trying to show, this whole story is to show if the X-Men / mutants are actually heroes or are they actually abominations. And this is a point of the story, actually shows that, hey, they're protecting people even though that could get them killed. They're heroes.
Yeah, I agree with Rod. If this was made today, everybody would be like, "Oh, the X-Men are bootlickers, and I'm done with this forever." Well, it's so. This isn't this is the first. I guess 2 times in the second issue, the police officers like save the day, and which is funny because I've read so many X-Men issues where it's not just the politicians that hate the X-Men; the police don't like them either.
Yeah, it was weird.
Like they're always weird to the X-Men, and so to kind of negate, they totally negate that because at the rally later that we'll talk about, there's a big policeman scene there as well. Actually, throughout the end of this book, they keep going back to these 2 cops. I mean, we'll talk about that, but yeah,
maybe it's not all cops; it's just these 2 cops they like.
They got the best cops in the whole in all of America. These are they got the best ones, and they're like, yeah, mutants. We love them.
But the one thing I liked about the Kate scene, I'm always confused what to call her. Like when we talk about old Kitty Pryde, do we call her Kitty or do we always call her Kate now? But anyway, so Kate, I like how she doesn't really try to she just holds this cop and is just like, don't kill him, it's my fault. And I was like, wow, like and she's so young, and to like do that, it's like, you're a fucking hero, man. Like you are a really good X-Men, which which she takes that to heart. You know, we see her throughout decades be an awesome X-person. But I really like that, and it also added to kind of the hopeless vibe that we get throughout most of this really intense 63 issues or so. Like, but she just is like staring down the barrel of a gun. She doesn't know she can phase people out of situations yet. You know, that hasn't happened yet either. And she just holds this cop and is just like, I'll die with you. And that was really intense. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of just really crazy moments when you read this the first time and then go back and look at it to try and impress you guys, because it's my first time on your pod. So like, you know, I'm like looking at all these scenes, thinking all this different stuff. But I mean, yeah, man, when you go back and think about some of these it's just so powerful. And in 63 issues in a book that was made in 1980, yes, it has its faults, but I mean, it's still, we're going to talk about it for 2 hours today. Like the 5 people took 2 hours out of their day to talk about this book 40 years after it was made, and hopefully a lot more people listen. So that's, I mean, that says a lot in and of itself too.
I would like it if a lot of people listen. That would be nice. Now, Tori, you have a powerfully, you are the first person to be loud when your friends are in danger. So how did this sequence play out for you, given the gravity of the world we live in?
For me, this one, I was more taken aback before we got into the subway car. The scene in the alleyway was a product of the times, I guess.
And if you read the extended version, you read the softened. Oh, but you read both, right? You read the extended and the original.
Both. I read actually, like, I guess this is better. But I just it just becomes very clear that, like, these fanatics are going to take anyone with them, and it's not any, it's, the fanaticism does not stop with actual purity. And so I think that resonates right now with this, with the ideas that we have to deal with today, that it's not just about people who are the whatever bigotry you subscribe to, but also that there are people who should be on your side who aren't, and that they need to suffer for it too. And that resonated a lot more with me. Honestly, I think the cop in the subway is just one of those. While I agree that I am also an ACAB kind of person, there are a few good eggs in there because the laws of probability say there have to be. And this one ignores the people who say, don't touch her, she's a ghost, and helps anyway. I found to be really sweet. I think she's 15. She needs some help, and she's not sure if she actually got through to her friends. I wasn't sure she got through to her friends.
And I mean, that the fact that she's able to get through, which leads to her phenomenal rescue. I actually really like her rescue sequence.
It's a great rescue.
It's, Magneto coming in as the White Knight, kind of like, because he could be. This is that first sign of it. And, the idea that this has been milked for every X movie. Some part of this is every X-Men movie. Most notably, X-Men 2 and Days of Future Past both draw heavily on this. And, when I think about classic Magneto stories, I guess I do kind of think about this one, but I also think about X-Men 104, where he, super tries to kill them. And I think about X-Men 150, where he super tries to kill them. And I think about things he's going to do after this, like X-Men 1 through 3, Mutant Genesis, Second Genesis, where the X-Men go to asteroid. They have to fight him in fucking space. He's so crazy. So, Nathan, when you think about Magneto and the bigger picture of the Marvel Universe and what this story, does saving Kitty in a flying subway car, Dark Phoenix, this is in every X-Men movie. Does saving Kitty in a flying subway car erase 104 and 150, or give him permission to be new X-Men 150 crazy?
Okay, first off, I have to say the art when he's picking up the subway car, like the city is so realistic. Like I love just like everything about the panel. But back to the actual question, Magneto, I think from 150, when he almost killed Kate, he realized like what his path was setting him down to, and this is probably the start of his redemption, because this is in between 150 and Secret Wars, where
your favorite. And he starts dating Wasp for no reason,
right? Like that was a romance out of nowhere. But so this was in between there. This was his big like step towards seeing things maybe more the way they are, but still set in his old Magneto ways.
I very much agree, and I think it really is. It's a tough call, like how to forgive somebody. Do you guys see Magneto as a hero from this point, or is it still kind of an uphill struggle for you guys?
My viewpoint's too polluted. I'm too used to him being sexy daddy Magneto. Like,
He's sexy daddy Magneto.
It's so hard to get that out of my head. And but I did like him in this graphic novel.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't have a problem not believing he would help these people. I was kind of curious why they took the magic carpet ride instead of Kurt teleporting this, gut shot officer to a hospital.
I think bamfing is hard on people, and if you're already wounded, I think bamfing is particularly disorienting.
Okay.
I think it was to not put the officer in shock. I love Nightcrawler too much, and I might just be like, how can I protect Kurt from getting in trouble? And like, so it's a little bit robot
He also
brain.
looked a little rough from dropping off an assassin at Rikers, so.
Right? Yeah. I mean, true.
However, speaking of X-Men that are looking a little rough, the weaponization of Charles Xavier is one of the creepiest things I've read in a really long time. It's disturbing and unsettling on several levels. The brainwashing technique, if you kind of think about it, is essentially telepathy. So in that regard, the humans and the purifiers are essentially doing to Xavier what they're accusing Xavier of doing to them, getting into their minds, reprogramming them against their will, turning them against their own, killing off a race. In a lot of ways, it quickly becomes that Xavier is a victim, and it sort of plays back into something else. We have this whole story where Xavier, Storm, and Scott are believed to have died in a car accident, but really they've survived, and now they're being tortured. Not that I'm defending him, because he's a piece of shit and he should die. He goes in that like Red Skull category. But Stryker is kind of the same. Stryker is being tortured. He survived something that in many ways he actually didn't come through. The human being didn't survive that, just this hate monster did. And I think the weaponization of Xavier creates an interesting parallel that Stryker actually is projecting the monster that he's become onto mutants rather than seeing an actual monster in mutants. And how do you guys feel about that idea of this, weaponized Xavier by a monster? We've seen it in X2. We've seen it done in so many stories over and over again. Does it play out well here, or does weaponized Xavier just kind of sit on the table?
I really liked weaponized Xavier. I feel like this is one of the high points of the story. I was like, "Ooh, this is what X2 was trying to do. Cool." Yeah. I was wondering where they got that from, because I was like, they did Weapon X and then they did this weird Xavier thing. That's weird.
Bryan Singer doesn't have original ideas, so
no, that's not no. But I really enjoyed it, and I love the artistry of it and like the imagery and everything. It was really creepy. It made you like, for a title that says God, Love, Man, Kills, it's going to be, pretty much quote unquote hardcore, but like it really showed you that he's torturing them so much that they're bleeding through their noses, and he's having all this imagery and he's talking all these, it was so hard to read, all these Bible verses at him to manipulate him. And I love that they show like how manipulative religion can be, and I'm just like, yes, thank you for this conversation that this brings. Thank you, Chris Claremont and everybody else that's involved. Thank you for that.
I loved how like even when Charles is resisting, like eventually in the end when he goes like, when Stryker says they are mutants and Charles is like, but they're my children, and he said, "Are you worthy, Charles?" And Charles is like, "Yes," kind of just resigned. And he kills his thinks he kills his two closest companions in the X-Men, Scott and Aurora, right now. So it's really powerful just to see him even fight that brainwashing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I very much agree. His fighting the brainwashing is actually one of my favorite things in the story in a weird way. Okay, so when you talk about them as superheroes, they're Xavier and Magneto. But when you talk about them as a gay couple, they're Eric and Charles. And there is something so Jonathan Hickman's X-Men about Eric being like, I can tell you that Charles didn't kill them. Instead, he put them to deep, deep sleep. I can tell you this because the helmet and shit. And Logan's like, they smell alive, bub. And everybody's like, oh, cool. Defibrillate them. And Magneto's like, got it. Which is like Like number one, he looks like Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek. He's just like, they're fine, and like I can't even. But you know, the modern X-Men, the 2020 X-Men, if you take a look at Sword, which is one of the most cutting-edge, brilliant books out there right now, and all of the positive stuff going on for Sword over in WandaVision, couldn't be happier for the idea of Sword. Well, but if you look at Sword and you look at X-Men and you look at New Mutants, there's so much going on about mutant power synergy. And it's so interesting to see that, you know, Claremont started seeding this shit in 1981. But Tori, you don't read the X-Men books like monthly. You don't read, you know, everything Hickman's doing right now. As somebody coming in from the outside, does the X-Men combining powers together like Care Bears work for you? Or are you a little bit like, this is a box of Lucky Charms and I'm okay?
I mean, I'm used to the idea of superheroes combining their powers to create Captain Planet more often than not. But I think it's because of moments like this in the 80s that the movies and stuff in the 90s and the aughts and the teens are able to happen. So it feels like this is the starter pack on what can become.
So now, you guys, you know, they recently, I think it's erroneous. I'm sorry, it's wrong because, okay, so recently they said that the Fastball Special was the first ever combination of mutant abilities and harmony. I have to disagree unless you're trying to tell me that Iceman nor Angel ever carried Scott, who then used an optic blast. Unless you're telling me Warren never carried Scott, who used an optic blast. I just don't believe you!
Wait, didn't Jean use her like telekinesis to guide people's like Cyclops' like beams before?
Didn't Mimic ever have a couple of mutants stand near him to use their powers all at once? So wasn't that a plan to use mutant power synergistically?
Okay, but see, that didn't have a name. They didn't name it. They didn't name it, so it didn't get counted.
Branding. It's all about branding.
Branding. Copyright it.
I first of all squished my mouth so small that it looked like Arseface. Number two, that's okay. I love Preacher more than anybody should. No one should read Preacher, but it's so good. I hate myself. But how did you guys feel about the fusion of power? Like, this is like gem fusion right up in here, right? This is Rainbow Quartz 2.0, who is the greatest gem fusion of all time.
I liked it. We're talking about the optic blast through the Banff portal, right?
Oh, see, I'm getting so confusing. I'm like, crystal gems right now. I'm saying how the X-Men kind of come together to be like a detective team where Magneto's like, they're not dead, and Logan's like, I don't know why Logan just did some coke off of them. Logan's like, they're alive. Definitely still alive. Very alive. Yeah. So how they work together in tandem to sort of figure out that Charles is, even though he's not really with them, he's still with them.
Oh no, I don't.
I mean, I guess we could say that this is the. Yeah, I guess we could say that this is the payoff of the Danger Room scene.
Yeah,
them working together to figure this out. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah,
we have come full circle.
Yeah.
I went to ever in my. I was like, what's on my screen? It's Blake's mic. I'm like, oh no!
What's that?
Swipe right. Swipe right.
Giant bug. But yeah, from now on, anytime anybody talks about this original graphic novel, they're going to be like, man, God Loves, Man Kills. That's got some really heavy shit in it. But you know what? The Danger Room scene.
Danger Room scene.
That's really powerful.
That's so much. Fucks, guys.
It fucks and it bangs and it sets up some fucks and bangs in the second issue.
The second issue.
Speaking of bangs in the second, right? Speaking of fucks and bangs in the second issue, the actual climax of this story is, you know, I'd broken this down into pages, right? The actual climax of the story is 12 fucking pages long, which isn't a complaint, but it's pretty long. And I have always thought the climax of God Loves, Man Kills is nearly identical to the climax of Days of Future Past in a lot of ways. They're incredibly different, but they're similar enough that the movies have borrowed pieces of both scenes every time they've used either. So, you know, it comes down to that moment where in the haze of battle, Stryker goes, "You call that human?" pointing at Nightcrawler. And I don't want to sound stupid, and I don't want anybody to pick on me, okay? Because I'm going to say something kind of like, okay, but hear me out. Mutants aren't human.
Oh,
Like, and I'm
That's
not
true.
even being an asshole, but
That's
they're
true.
not human. We're not asking humans to accept that some of people look different than them. We're asking humans to accept that there's something new, that there's a new idea. And I'm not saying that that powerful moment, the humanity in all of us, God loves, man kills, God, man, you know, we're talking about humanity, and we're talking about the sometimes when I get like really emotional, I make Billy Eichner face, right? But we're talking about the struggle to stay alive. And so we're using human as a stand-in for Hume. Anybody who's played, you know, an RPG or Dungeons and Dragons, you have Humes, which kind of like, it's human enough to make everything kind of work, right? I think there's something almost, this highlights something almost antithetical about the idea of the X-Men within the X-Men, that until Hoxpox, there was no way to address. How do you say the X-Men are human when they're clearly not? And we know they're not, and we accept that they're not. Until the days of Krakoa, I don't know, I don't think that this was ever really addressed, but the X-Men to me aren't human. They're mutants, and that's different. They're part of the peoples of the world, but they're not human. How do you guys feel about the crux of these issues argument coming down to a phrase that the X-Men themselves say doesn't apply to them?
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of pages of the comic books, it's been argued over and over again that the X-Men, they try to force the idea that X-Men are human, like the mutants are human. Like they try to do it over and over again, like with Havoc and the Avengers and all this other stuff. It's like we're human, guys. We're human. And now, like you said, with Krakoa and Hoxpox, Dawn of X, Reign of X, all that, I'm glad that we're finally coming to the realization that was set up in God Loves, Man Kills, that yes, mutants are not human. They evolved from humans, but they're not. There's something more, something better, but something more that needs to be, you know, accepted, just like everything else. Like we had the Neanderthals, and now you have, you know, humans, and then I think that's the order, right? And then you have mutants. So it's like it's an evolution. A little bit. Oh, we cannot hear Nico.
We cannot hear Nico.
Oh no, I pressed the mute button. I was like, I think there's Cro-Magnons in the middle, and like I think I'm about to lose my biology degree.
That's I don't have a biology degree, so I can be wrong. It's fine.
But isn't it? It's more about their humanity than them being human, though, right?
Yeah.
So it's about taking the character with the most humanity, Nightcrawler, who looks the most like a devil, and having Mike Pence yell at him, and like, like the one thing I didn't realize about that panel. So originally when they did it, in the original copies, he doesn't have a tail, but when they redid it, he has a tail on it. I did not know that until Twitter told me that. So, yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's a good factoid." But it's all about these more than human characters still having their humanity, and I think that's what the crux of the story is.
That is the crust of this story.
It is the crust of the story. Wow, that was bad.
So it kind of comes down to the difference between human and humanity, and I think that is really a powerful argument, because I realized something reading it this time, and I'm so happy, I'm so proud, right? I've always thought that the end of this issue was kind of weird, because I've always been like, Storm and Cyclops, that's a terrible couple. I don't want that. And now I've come to realize what they're trying to say.
Yeah.
The story opens with Kitty having an argument about race with Stevie, a white woman and a black woman having a disagreement over the understanding of inclusion and diversity. And then the ending shows a white man and a black woman having a moment of shared renewed hope for the future. But you forgot to bring up race for 50 pages. It doesn't work.
Yep. Yes. I wholeheartedly agree. And as a product of interracial relationships, I like interracial relationships, or else I wouldn't exist. But I don't. First of all, I would never want Aurora and Scott together. You know?
No,
They can be really good friends. They can be best friends. That's great. If they get together, I will burn Marvel to the ground. But so that's why seeing the end of this book, I was like, ew, 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 ew.
You're like Bloodstorm and Young Scott all over again. No,
yeah,
ew.
I actually did like Bloodstorm and Young Scott together.
I actually was gonna say, yeah, I'm on the side of that one.
I like that. That's different. That's not technically same thing, but yeah. Anyway, I like you said, Nico, I get what they were trying to do, even though it was extremely out of the blue. And that's the most dialogue I think that we get out of Storm. I mean, she does talk throughout the series or the little graphic novel, but the most time we see this basically the only black woman that is a mutant, the only black mutant, talk is to Scott, and then she's hanging all over him, and I'm just like, that's fine, I guess. They're coming together and they're a family. They made Xavier realize the dream is still true. Yay, yay, yay. Happy times.
And I'm grateful for those happy times, but man, it clunked hard for me most of my life until this read through where I finally understood what they were trying to do. And I still kind of feel like I don't get it. Now, Rod, I mean this with all affection to everyone else, but Rod, your words on the representation of a black character in a story that is meant to be a racial parallel or kind of like defining. However, I think there's also something to be said for Storm was a woman that was victimized and never given a voice except to say she's grateful that she survived. Tori, yes. I asked you to come to X-Men, and I was like, come join my wonderful X-Men episode. Ooh, woo, woo. And then I was like, by the way, Storm's going to be treated like trash.
Yeah, it was not great. I was a little taken aback that we sidelined these major characters who might have something to say. I feel like this is just very much a white man's view of what he thinks racism is. I really, really do. Yeah. Like, it's like he's like, oh, I understand the Holocaust, so that's gonna get like top billing on how we view this, and then we'll throw in a slur about black people because we know that's bad, and then we'll murder a bunch of Hispanics because they look like gang members, so that's okay. And
my cousin.
Yeah, like it's just, and then we'll point at the one guy who's obviously like not human to talk about humanity, when like the idea of humanity being what makes us human is such like a self-centered like linguistic trick. Like it's just it was like when I was reading Excalibur and saying to Nico, I don't think that Kurt would be a Nazi. I don't think they'd let him.
Yeah.
So it felt like he was like, I have one story to tell. It's gonna be like the Holocaust. We're gonna kill black kids. It's gonna be great, and it's gonna be about mutants instead. And then it doesn't hit the same way 40 years later, and the frame doesn't help.
Yeah.
No. So let's do it. Can
I say one thing about Charles and Magneto?
Oh, please do. Everybody's favorite gay couple. Go for it.
The thing about Charles and Magneto is that I think that moment where Charles rejects Magneto is the actual payoff of the brainwashing scenes. That's the third time that it's the exact same thing of come take my hand, and Charles like not following.
Wow, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that is the actual payoff of the brainwashing scenes. Otherwise, it's sort of like, yeah,
Yeah, I definitely got that. We needed that scene. That's what really brought it, I think, home to me, and that's what I really would have liked that to be like the last scene, rather than the last scene that we got. Mm-hmm. But I agree, brought it home.
Oh, just one thing real quick. It just how powerful it is that Stryker when they're in the convention center. Is that where they're Madison Square Garden, right? Is that where they are?
Mhm.
When they're at the hate con.
I know when they're at hate con, and like just like how it takes a different meaning now when you're reading it, and he like actually pushes the lady off the stage and kills her in front of everybody, and like at least there's repercussions for it. So I'm like, yay. I'm like,
we've gotten some final thoughts from everybody. So Blake, I gotta have yours now, man. Otherwise, I'm gonna feel sad and lonely here. So Blake, you know, walking away from this story before we can touch on the framing sequence, which we'll get to the framing sequence in a minute. But how did you feel about the closing of this, Blake? You know, this is like, you keep saying like you're programmed to be like Magneto and Charles are going to keep doing this thing. This is the origin of Magneto and Charles doing the thing.
Yeah.
So like, how do you feel about their love beginning its dryer cycle?
You know, I liked it. Again, I didn't know until you had told me that a lot of what happens in this original graphic novel was first instances of, you know, like this was the first time Magneto did sort of a good thing, tortured someone for a good reason, and you know, this is the first time in a long time where they're not rekindling their friendship, but starting to there's dialogue between them, not a battle, basically, right?
I'm trying to imagine torturing for good, and I'm like, this is Guantanamo Gary. Guantanamo Gary only goes after the terrorists. Be like Guantanamo Gary, not like Guantanamo Karen. She on her co-Guantanamanians. Like, I'm trying to imagine torturing for good, and that's where I'm stuck.
It only works in the context of this book, because if you read it as a graphic novel, because of that page turn we talked about earlier, where you're like, oh, bad guys torture even worse.
Bad guys torture even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I really dig. So a little bit about me, like I told you guys earlier, I was raised Catholic. One of my favorite kinds of horror movies is religious horror. So like, when you throw creepy religious people, like some of the people in my family that I luckily haven't had to see for a long time because of the pandemic, but like when you bring like that kind of realness into comic books and horror movies and movies, like I really dig it, and I really thought that worked. I think faith is a great thing. It does wonderful things for people. Doesn't do much for me, and I think it gets manipulated and makes really bad things happen a lot. And so to see that called out, I think in that essence, I think God Loves Man Kills. Oh, and that title, all that is great. And that part is extremely pertinent still today, as we see whack jobs listen to ignorant people on television that are selling them a car of hatred, and they're buying it.
But they're not on Twitter anymore.
They're not on Twitter.
Yay for small things.
It's true. Just tiny blessings, right? But you know, like there's tens of millions of scary people like that, and we all just watched them be fucking crazy on the news the other day. And I really liked that part about this X-Men story, calling that out decades ago. Also sad that that's still a big problem today. Like, you know, our cell phones are tinier, our cars are cooler and can drive themselves. This is still a huge problem 40
Our
years
TVs
later.
are still flat.
Yeah, we have digital comics. We can read comics on tablets now. We don't even need paper anymore.
Our comics are even shinier than they need to be.
Oh, big, so big.
Yeah, that kind of broke my heart just thinking about that. Like, wow, like we so much has changed and so much hasn't. But then, like we were just talking about, with all the great stuff in this story, the racial bookend blatantly tagged on, like that felt just tagged on, like, oh, let's go back to this and maybe ignore that earlier part. It kind of fucks it up, and that sucked, because there's a lot that could be, I mean, you can't cut a lot out of 63 pages, but you could have rewritten a couple panels and changed a couple words, and
you already had the artist coming back.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, points are made.
Now, I have to address the ugly elephant in the room right now. So, without the framing sequence, I give this story a 9 out of 10. To be like totally honest with you, I'm a little blind. I want to see what I want to see. But without the framing sequence, I give this story a 9 out of 10. I have my egregious problems with it, but if they could clean up the stuff that I think is literally culturally ugly, if they could clean up the things that I think are production problems, we would be looking at a 10 out of 10 for me. It's how I feel about the Frank Miller Daredevil saga. If you can find ways to correct the cultural appropriation, I think you're looking at a perfect story. And I think if you add the framing sequence, it's like a 6 out of 10. Like I'm barely even kidding. It just becomes this, sometimes a framing sequence is Old Lady Rose on the Titanic. And sometimes the framing sequence is the merchant in Agrabah telling you all about this amazing tale of this amazing lamp that, this amazing street rat Aladdin. And it's so powerful that it starts the first movie and ends the third movie. And that's epic to me. Like, I even remember as a kid thinking that was cool. Mm-hmm. These bookends are so a white woman talking to a black woman about racism again. Mm-hmm. Get away from the one problem.
Yeah.
I didn't like that as soon as we cut back to them, they're all sobbing. I was like, why are we sobbing? It doesn't make sense. The ending wasn't even like crying worthy. Like,
and
yes,
how does Kitty know parts of this?
Yeah, how does Kitty know parts of it? Like, how does Kitty know that? I guess Magneto talked to her or whatever. Okay, probably. Sure. They talked. They all conversed. I can let that go. They've been together for years. I can let it go.
Fine.
But yeah, I can. You know what?
Yes, I'm fine.
But I just couldn't get past that. Why are we crying? Why are we like not even like a tear? It's like yeah. I'm like, no, that's not what this story is.
No.
Even when Storm, Cyclops, and Xavier die, it's like, oh yeah, they're dead. They're not dead, but they're dead. Oh no! Come on.
Yeah, this would be the kind of story that like I would listen to and I'd be like, wow, so we're still there, huh? Yeah, yeah, we are. I'm madder than I was 10 minutes ago. Thank you for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And to make it even more heavy-handed, they have a Sentinel show up, like.
And it's a woman Sentinel, which I there's something so irritating to me about the fact that they kind of pretend that this might touch on some gender issues as well. Like, they kind of pretend, but like it doesn't. They don't go anywhere fucking near it. Yeah. And they use the fact that they passed the Bechdel test in the second version as a way around actually addressing gender issues in comics, which is an industry that is so fucking rife with them that it's impossible to, you can literally not walk through a comic convention without seeing a woman be like trying to cover her body. So like, let's not pretend that gender isn't an issue here. And let's not use the fact that it's a woman in the Sentinel suit at the end as a way to not have to deal with gender issues. That doesn't make it better at all.
It felt
Karen
like
Sentinel.
a fight with a significant other. You said something bad and you get in trouble for it, and now you're going to try and make yourself seem less wrong, even though you know you're wrong. And so you just you're like, babe, but, and like every but is like another stupid page that they put into this comic, and it's just like you shouldn't have said the N-word, man. That's it. You don't need the extra pages. You just need to take that part out, rewrite just a little bit, and it'd be really good. But no, you just keep adding more like awkward hand holding.
Dig it deeper.
Yeah.
Did Kate tell when she retold this whole story to this girl? That's what we're getting, right? Mm-hmm. When she retold the story to this black girl, did she tell her that she used the N-word?
I hope she just phased her mouth out.
I'm like, and what did she say? Are we supposed to believe
that? Would have been good.
Oh, I bet she did. She did the white girl like.
Yeah. I'm like, are we supposed to believe that she said this to this like outspoken young black woman, and she didn't say anything back, and her response to this told stories is crying to Kate?
And what was with the ending where Kate's just kind of like, sometimes you walk a lonely road as a mutant cowboy avoiding racisms?
It made no sense.
So, for those of you who aren't aware, Chris Claremont left the books in 1991 after 15 beautiful years of masterful storytelling. He would return in 1999-2000 to work on Fantastic Four, creating Valeria Richards, as well as redefining Wolverine for a modern era. He would go on to, in the year 2000, he would go on to write something known as the Claremont Revolution, which transformed the X-Men books and set up all of the amazing things that Grant Morrison did. And he hung around since about 2000. So he's done another 20 years. During that 20 years, he had a stroke and a heart attack and didn't quite bounce back quite as strong sales-wise. And I sometimes think you can tell that he feels as though he is a writer being pushed out, because he has gone for a lot of what I call later in life narratives. A lot more, these are the wise sage tales that you tell toward the end. And I would like to think that he has a million more tales in him. I'm a big Claremont fan, and I've always been. But this is one of those, he's still writing really cutting edge things. He's still creating stories that are important. These extra 10 pages took a classic, and it sometimes Disney likes to re-release a film with a song that had been cut and 2 more minutes of footage. I would not go back. This is not, I'm not going to reread the extended pages.
No.
Ever.
No.
I'm going to skip to the proper book. And, that's kind of my parting shot with it. This is still one of my favorite X-Men stories. I would love to know your guys' final thoughts on God Loves, Man Kills, extended edition or otherwise. Let's follow our train, because then it's in order and I can track it. Rod, what are your closing thoughts on this super classic?
My closing thoughts. One negative is that it made me not like Kate more. It made me not like Kitty. I like Kate.
That's a great distinction.
I don't like Kitty. I didn't like Kitty until she became Kate. So there you go. And number 2, without the extended, just the regular, even without the modifications, I give this story about like a 7.5 out of an 8, because it is a good definition of what the X-Men are and their struggle in society. And I like that. And I would give this to a person that wants to read X-Men right off the bat. Give them a little warning, walk them through it before they read it, but it is a good definition of what the X-Men are and what you can expect in future X-Men stories.
I love that. I really do think this is a great entry point. This is a great X-Men Chapter 0 to understand the titles. Nathan, you joined me on this bonus 10-page reread. Do you feel stronger for having read it? What are your closing thoughts on GLMK?
Reading it now versus reading it when I originally read it, it feels more like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Network, but like if you watch it way back in the past, it just seems like this far-fetched, way out there cautionary tale. But now if you're watching it now, you're like, oh, some of that really goes on in real life. So God Love Man Kills, even with its dated and problematic aspects, reads to me like that same sort of cautionary tale where we never learned the lesson and it's gone almost the way that it is in the book.
So Mutant 1984.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Blake, I am so glad that we finally found a way to get you in like a live thing. You were in the Platinum Dazzler Awards, which I would like to thank everybody for being a part of the Platinum Dazzler Awards. It was the most wonderful award show in 2021. Thank you all so much. So, Blake, it was amazing to have you be part of that experience. And I'm so glad we were able to get you on an episode with people talking, proving that you're not an algorithm. And how did you feel reading such a classic X story when you're such a versed X fan who had missed it each time?
Yeah, part of me felt kind of stupid because I was like, not like stupid, but I was like, damn, I can't believe I never read like of just all the recommendations people give me. It just got kind of lost in the pile. But and also the word that Kitty says, like Rod talked about earlier, we've all seen that. Like people love to post it and remind us of it all the time on social media. So I'd seen that before, and now I like really saw it and see where it came from. But yeah, like what Nathan said too, it's just so many parts of it like really hit like my troubles of current society, and it worked thematically, and it also like bothered me because like guess what? We don't have the fucking X-Men, guys. Like we just have to deal with this by ourselves, and that's kind of terrifying. And it's cool to remember that, you know, like, or to read about heroes and distract ourselves. But yeah, I'm really glad I read it. I'm really glad I read it and had people to talk to about it, because this is very much a book. It's a good book club kind of book. Like if you guys like, if you have like a group of people, like just like what we're doing, like it's nice to have people to talk to about this stuff. But this is really easy to talk about, and it pushes a lot of buttons for people, and it enables you to talk about harder subjects through the gaze of Marvel Comics and the X-Men, which is just kind of that in and of itself is pretty cool. I'm glad I read it. It's got problems. The new hardcover looks nice, but skip those new pages. Read those. The interviews are cool.
Oh yeah,
it probably comes with the six pages that Neil Adams drew, which are beautiful. But yeah, the original it's good. That's how it needs to be read. We didn't need the extra pages. It doesn't work as well. It doesn't hit you as hard turning that first page and falling into the story as these children are running for their lives. You lose that. They just take that away from you. And so yeah, read the original graphic novel. Don't worry about those new pages. It's okay to be angry sometimes. And this reminds you of that.
Well, and I want to jump on something you said before I can. It's like right here, and I don't want to lose it because it's like so far out of my brain. But the other major Kitty says some words Kitty should not say comes in New Mutants number 4 from 1984. Who's Scaring Stevie? The other time Kitty Pryde says the N-word, it is again in front of fucking Stevie Hunter. Only that time, she reads this laundry list of bad words. Imagine it was all about gay people. She's like, if you call someone a fudge packer or a dick licker or a ball worshiper or a smegma lover, or like, she really gets deep in there on some words. And like, you just want to be like Chris Claremont. You cannot hide behind the fact that she's a cute little white girl. You cannot hide behind that, especially when she's meant to be the voice piece that brings young women into comics, right? Tori, you really are one of those women that was, you know, Chris Claremont's hope was that Kitty would make you feel safe in the X-Men. When you read the X-Men, does Kitty Pryde represent what you want to be?
I mean, I like the idea of her technologically smart, like strong, loyal. She can be great, but she is a product of the writing she gets, and the writing she got in the beginning was not good. I really enjoyed this story because I can see where it influenced what comes afterwards, like all of the media that X-Men enjoyed in the 21st century is a lot of it is based on the seeds that are planted here. And so for me, it was exciting to get to see that play out for the first time. It's unfortunate that those ideas were sort of spoiled for me, so I didn't come in being like, oh my god, this is a whole new side of Magneto. I had no idea. But it was exciting to see it done for the first time for me.
And exciting for me was getting to talk about it with you guys. I've loved this story since I'm like, and you know, getting to talk about it now that I'm like, is a lot of fun. And I really loved getting to talk about God Loves, Man Kills with you guys. And until we come back to Exeter Podcast to talk about some more amazing mutant stories, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you.
Bye. Bye.